strategic genius, divine calling, or a neurological profile that processed the world differently. That simply did not process social hierarchy the way most brains do. And again, the answer is almost certainly all of the above, tangled so tightly that separating them destroys what you seek. She was the Sibyl of the Rhine. She was a doctor of the church, though that title would not come for another 862 years. She was a woman who saw the universe in blazing light and refused, absolutely refused, to close her eyes. She died in 1179, at the age of 81, and on the night of her death her nuns reported that 2 streams of light appeared in the sky above the monastery, crossing to form a bright cross, which is either a miracle or a coincidence, or the kind of thing that happens when a person's entire life has been so saturated with light that even the sky decides to join in. You choose. Hildegard almost certainly already knew the answer, and now, perhaps, so do you. We leave the Rhine, the convent, the vineyards, and the slow grey river, and walk south into Italy where the sun is harder and the dust is thicker. The religion there is louder, more physical, and considerably more likely to involve a man taking off all his clothes in a public square. Because we need to talk about the holy fools, and to do that we need to talk about Francis of Assisi, and to talk about Francis we need to talk about Brother Juniper. And to talk about Brother Juniper we need to talk about a pig. Specifically, a pig's foot. You are in a Franciscan friary in the Italian countryside. It is the early 13th century. The stones are warm under your sandals and someone is sick. One of the brothers, lying in bed, feverish and miserable. He wants a cooked pig's foot and has mentioned this several times. The other brothers have nodded sympathetically and done absolutely nothing. They are Franciscan friars who own nothing, have no pig, and have more pressing concerns than one man's deeply specific pork-based cravings. Enter Brother Juniper. He's heard about the pig's foot situation and is concerned. The kind of concern that does not pause to consider secondary consequences. This is a trait that will define his entire career as a Franciscan, and provide enough material for what amounts to a medieval slapstick comedy special. Juniper goes to find a pig. He finds one in a field, presumably someone's pig. This does not slow Juniper down even slightly. He has a knife. He has a sick brother. The equation is simple. Sick brother wants pig's foot, pig has feet, Juniper has knife. He approaches the pig. He removes a foot. He leaves the rest of the pig, alive, now extremely unhappy, and conspicuously 3-legged. He goes back to the friary, cooks the foot, and brings it to the sick brother with the radiant satisfaction of a man who solved a problem through direct action. The pig's owner is, understandably, furious. He arrives at the friary shouting, calls the friars thieves, calls them liars, calls them names the hagiographers probably cleaned up. The other brothers are mortified. Francis is summoned, and Francis, himself no stranger to dramatic public behaviour, listens carefully to the whole story. Then he does something remarkable. He turns to Juniper and tells him to apologise, not for cutting off the pig's foot, but for upsetting the man. When the pig's owner continues to rage, Francis sends Juniper back out, and Juniper processes the instruction to make it right through a very particular mental filter. Juniper finds the man and tries to convince him that the pig should be glad to have lost a foot for such a charitable cause. He embraces the man, kisses him, and is so overwhelmingly sincere that the pig's owner eventually gives up, slaughters the rest of the pig, and donates the meat to the friars. This is not an isolated incident. This is Tuesday for Brother Juniper. The stories pile up. He gave away his clothes so often that other friars were ordered to stop him. He was found playing on a seesaw in Rome, a grown friar in his habit on a children's seesaw, and when questioned did not understand why this was inappropriate. He once prepared 2 weeks' worth of food all at once, dumping everything into a single enormous pot. Porridge, eggs, vegetables, and scraps. Brother Juniper seemed genuinely confused when the other brothers declined to eat his chaotic stew, staring at the rejected pot with bewildered innocence. He cut bells and silver ornaments off church altar cloths to give to the poor, and could not understand why the sacristan was upset, since the poor clearly needed silver more than any altar did. The other friars called him a lunatic, a disgrace to the order, simple, foolish, a liability. Francis, who talked to animals, threw himself into thorn bushes and reportedly developed stigmata, looked at Brother Juniper and said, "Would to God I had a whole forest of such junipers." A whole forest, not one embarrassing juniper to be tolerated, but a whole forest of them. This is where the concept of holy foolishness becomes genuinely radical. What Francis is saying is that Juniper's literal mindedness, his inability to grasp implied social rules, his tendency to take instructions at face value, these qualities are not flaws, they are gifts. They are, in Francis's framing, closer to God than the smooth social competence of people who always know the right thing to say. Francis called his friars jugglers for God. Joculatores domini. A juggler entertains. A juggler breaks the normal flow of things, throws objects into the air and catches them in unexpected ways. People stop and stare, and for a moment the ordinary rules of the world are suspended, and something playful and strange and free takes their place. The tradition of holy foolishness is older than Francis, going back to Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, we are fools for Christ's sake. It winds through the Eastern Orthodox tradition, where holy fools, a Eurodivi in Russian, deliberately behaved in shocking ways, wearing rags, sleeping in streets, shouting prophecies in the marketplace. The holy fool's job was to be a mirror, so far outside the norms that the norms themselves became visible, became questionable, became, just for a moment, absurd. The holy fool tradition created a space, a social, theological, cultural space, in which being profoundly, unmistakably different from everyone around you was not just tolerated, but venerated. If you could not read social cues, that was because you were reading divine ones. If you could not understand why people cared about money and status, you understood something more important. If your behaviour was bizarre and incomprehensible to the people around you, that was because you were operating on a frequency that ordinary people could not receive. Historians still argue whether the holy fool tradition was genuinely accepting of cognitive difference, or merely a subtle form of containment, managing disruptive individuals by assigning them a respected but marginal role. There is real evidence on both sides. Some holy fools lived comfortable lives within their communities, beloved and protected. Others were beaten, imprisoned, or killed. Their holiness was recognised only after they were safely dead, and for someone like Brother Juniper, whose mind worked differently, the Franciscan friary offered something remarkable. It offered a context in which his differences were not just accepted but celebrated, a framework in which his inability to be normal was reframed as a refusal to be worldly. The community looked at his most baffling behaviours and said, yes, more of that, the whole forest of that. Whether Juniper was autistic is a question we cannot answer with certainty. He lived 800 years ago. We have hagiographic accounts, not clinical assessments, but the pattern is there, shimmering under the surface like Hildegard's visions. And it tells us something not just about Juniper, but about the medieval world, that it had spaces for different minds, strange spaces, holy spaces, spaces that came with costs, but spaces nonetheless. Now come with me to Norwich. It is the late 14th century, and England smells the way 14th century England always smells, strongly and with great variety and not always pleasantly. You're walking through narrow streets that twist like anxious thoughts, past timber-framed houses that lean toward each other conspiratorially, past a market where someone is selling eels. Someone else is arguing about the price of wool. You're heading for a church, the Church of St. Julian, which sits near the River Wensum. It sits in a part of Norwich that is old even by Norwich standards, and Norwich, as a city, is old by anyone's reckoning. You approach from the north side, and at first it looks like every other medieval parish church. Stone walls, small windows, a tower that does not quite commit to being tall. But on the south side, attached to the church like a barnacle on a hull, there is a small room with 3 windows, one opening into the church. One window opens to a servant's quarters, so food can be passed in and waste passed out. One opens to the outside world so people can come for advice, counsel and prayers. Inside this room, a woman is sitting. She has been sitting here for a long time. She will sit here for a long time more. Her name is Julian. She's writing a book that will not be widely read for another 500 years. And when read, it will prove one of the most extraordinary theological works in the English language. It is called Revelations of Divine Love, and it is the first book written in English by a woman that we know of. There are probably others. History has the memory of a goldfish when it comes to women's writing. But before we talk about what Julian wrote, we need to talk about how she got into this room. The process of becoming an anchorite is one of the most extraordinary rituals in medieval Christianity, and it tells you something important about the relationship between enclosure and peace. The ceremony is, essentially, a funeral, your funeral while you're alive. You attend your own last rites. The bishop performs the commendation of the dying over your living, conscious body. Prayers are said for the repose of your soul. You're sprinkled with holy water. In some accounts, you lie prostrate while the office of the dead is recited over you. You are, in the eyes of the church, dying to the world. The person you were is ending. The person you are becoming, the anchorite, the enclosed one, is being born. And then you walk into the cell, and in some versions of the ceremony, the door is walled shut behind you, bricked up, sealed. You are in. The world is out. You will stay in until you die, at which point the wall opens, your body is removed, the cell cleaned, and eventually someone else will walk in and the wall will rise again. Let that settle for a moment. A person, voluntarily, with full knowledge of what they are choosing, decides to be walled into a small room for the rest of their life. No travel, no variety, no spontaneous decisions, no crowds, no markets, no weather on their face except through 3 small windows, the same walls, the same light, the same prayers, every day. Your first reaction probably is horror, the reaction of a mind that values freedom and movement and novelty and choice. But consider the possibility that for some minds, this is not horror. For some minds, this is relief. Think about what anchoritic enclosure eliminates. Unpredictability, the need to navigate crowds, to read facial expressions, to decode constantly shifting social dynamics. It eliminates the noise of a medieval town, the shouting, hammering, bells, animals and people, always the people, wanting things, expecting things, communicating in ways that are exhausting to decode. Anchoritic life removes all of that. It replaces chaos with order, and replaces the terrifying openness of the world with 3 windows, a set of walls, and a schedule that never ever changes. The Ancrain Vissa, a guide for anchoresses written in the early 13th century, describes the daily routine in detail that borders on the obsessive, and I mean that as a compliment. When to pray, when to eat, when to sleep, how to arrange the cell, what to wear, how to sit. A manual for the most controlled, predictable environment medieval technology could produce. By the 15th century, the anchoritic life had become so popular among women that there were twice as many female anchorites as male ones. Historians still argue whether this gender imbalance reflects genuine preference, lack of other options for women seeking autonomy, or some combination that resists simple explanation. The answer is almost certainly complicated. What is clear is that anchoritic enclosure offered something almost nothing else in medieval society offered women: solitude, silence, and total control over their own environment. Julian used hers to think. With the systematic intensity of a mind that could not be satisfied with easy answers, she thought about the nature of divine love. Her revelations of divine love begins with 16 visions, or showings, that she experienced during a severe illness when she was about 30 years old. She nearly died. She saw Christ's blood flowing, the Virgin Mary as a young girl, and the entire cosmos held in God's hand like something small and round and fragile. She wrote, "In this he showed me a little thing, the quantity of a hazelnut lying in the palm of my hand, the whole of creation the size of a hazelnut." It is one of the most famous images in English mysticism, and it was produced by a woman sitting in a stone box the size of a generous closet. What followed the visions was not a quick transcription. It was 20 years of thinking, turning the visions over, analysing them, questioning them, building a systematic theology around them. The long text of the Revelations is not a diary of mystical experience. It is a philosophical treatise that argues, reasons, considers objections, and wrestles with the problem of evil.